Whether straight, loose, or spiritual, movie remakes get a bad rep. Sure, there are more of them than there ought to be, and yes, we have seen it all before, but you would be surprised at how often a decent reimagining does come along, though sometimes, even then, one new cast member can stick out like a sore thumb. I'm Josh from What Culture, and these are great movie remakes with one miscast role. Up first, Daisy Ridley as Mary Debenham, Murder on the Orient Express. Murder on the Orient Express returned to our screens in 2017 with an updated aesthetic, and Kenneth Branagh both behind and in front of the camera as a legendary Agatha Christie detective, Hercule Poirot. Joining him to solve the mystery of who killed Johnny Depp's gangster Edward Ratchet on board the titular train is an all-star cast, including Judi Dench, Penelope Cruz, and Daisy Ridley as Governess Mary Debenham. Each passenger on the train has a reason to kill Mr. Ratchet, and the film is a quick murder followed by a lengthy anatomy of their reasons conducted by a grand, mustachioed Poirot, all the while the train is stranded by an avalanche. And every member of the expansive cast hits their mark and pulls their weight, sinking seamlessly into their parts. Well, except one. Maybe it's the fact that she was in the middle of her Star Wars run and couldn't shake her Rey-ness, or it could be everyone around her is just too good, but either way, Daisy Ridley doesn't quite feel at home in Murder on the Orient Express. Rarely a scene goes by with her in which we are not reminded that she's just reading lines. Yes, she gives it a good shot, but in a stacked cast like this, she does stick out. Next up, Matt Damon as Texas Ranger LaBeouf. True Grit. The Coen brothers' True Grit is a masterful modern western, following young Mattie Ross as she hires drunken lawman Rooster Cogburn to track down Tom Chaney, the outlaw who murdered her father. The West feels vast, lawless, and is full of the kind of quirky types the Coens are known for. The characterization and presentation of pretty much every character is dead on, down to the rough and ready clothes and slurred voices, except for Matt Damon's Texas Ranger LaBeouf. Damon is, of course, a brilliant actor, and he does a good job managing all the moods and nuances of the part. The problem is, it's just not quite the right performance for the film. His Ranger is inconsistent, sometimes coming across as a true Western authority, and sometimes just a plain old idiot, moving too far each time the wind changes. True Grit is indeed humorous, but not in the absurd way of the Coens' contemporary set work. Instead, it's more of a piece with the tone of No Country for Old Men. And in his defense, the character is definitely intended to be a more polished outsider to the state, but with his pearly whites and clean-cut appearance, he feels a step away from the rest of the cast, who embed themselves deep into the era and the accents. Wiping a streak of mud through that Hollywood shine just didn't dim it enough. Up next, Nick Nolte as Sam Borden, Cape Fear. Given how he firmly put his stamp on the material, it can be easy to forget that Martin Scorsese's psychological thriller Cape Fear is a remake of the 1962 film of the same name. Scorsese took the basic elements of that picture and turned it all up to 11, wrenching it forward into a very contemporary feeling early 90s, and placing his golden boy, Robert De Niro, in the center of it to play against type as the tattooed psychopath Max Cady. Cady has just got out of the joint for some particularly heinous crimes and tracks down his clean-as-a-whistle public defender Sam Borden, played by Nick Nolte, who he believes threw the case intentionally. Cady inserts himself into Borden's life and uses what he's learned about law and procedure while in prison to make Sam's life a nightmare, while simultaneously making moves on his teenage daughter Dani. Now, De Niro is way OTT here, but it works for the character and for the sinister edge Scorsese creates throughout the film. Nolte, however, is never quite right. The problem is that the actor was used to playing tough guys, frequently lawmen with a dark side. The power balance then of the scenes between him and De Niro never feels bang on, and although he doesn't derail the film by any means, Nick Nolte just doesn't feel like the right kind of guy for a family man public defender. Next up, Robert Loggia as Frank Lopez, Scarface. Scarface took the already successful Al Pacino and Brian De Palma and made them a permanent part of the 80s zeitgeist. The film, of course, tells the story of Tony Montana, a low-level Cuban hood who works his way to the top in America, enriching himself by selling drugs and becoming a Miami kingpin. It's a classic rags-to-riches gangster story with a dark crime twist, bringing Tony face-to-face with his misdeeds and morality, and it is exhilarating and infinitely quotable. Near flawless is a phrase so often applied to Scarface, but there's a reason why it's not just flawless outright. There are a few dodgy accents and castings in general that probably wouldn't cut the mustard by today's standards. But what stood out even in the 80s was casting Robert Loggia, another fellow NYC Sicilian alongside Al Pacino as Frank Lopez. The actor has real trouble wrangling his New York brogue into Miami Cuban and winds up sounding like a mix between stereotypically Italian and Mexican. And in fact, when he is in scenes opposite Pacino, his accent seems to only amplify the worst parts of Pacino's. This leaves a few key moments, most crucially the one in which Tony kills Frank, feeling a bit SNL. Next up, John Travolta as Edna Turnblad, Hairspray. Adam Shankman's take on Hairspray gave audiences of all ages a new go-to musical in the noughties, eking out its rightful place alongside previous instant classics like Cabaret, Grease, and Moulin Rouge. Set in 1960s America, the film tells a story of racial progressivism and inclusion, all centering around teenager Tracy Turnblad and her efforts to become a dance star on local television. And John Travolta surprised everyone by donning a fat suit and a wig to play protagonist Tracy's mother, Edna. Now, there is a whole conversation to be had around using fat suits in general, and in the 18 years since Hairspray's release, this kind of prosthetic has been seen less and less in films, particularly in comedy. But that's not actually the big issue here. The problem with Travolta's turn as Edna is that he tries to play it too straight. The part was originally written by John Waters to be played to perfection by longtime collaborator Divine in the 1988 original. To play the part straight and without the drag queen roots then is to miss the point altogether and robs Hairspray of a little bit of its intended charm, spunk, and sense of inclusion. Next up, Aaron Taylor Johnson as Friedrich Harding, Nosferatu. In 2025, Robert Eggers focused his idiosyncratic gothic stylings on producing a new version of Nosferatu designed to honor the 1922 German expressionist original, while using all the tricks and trappings of modern cinema to bring the thing to life and chill a whole new generation of viewers. With Nicholas Hoult as real estate agent Thomas Hutter, Lily Rose Depp as his deranged wife Ellen, and Bill Skarsgård as Count Orlok, the malevolent vampire playing and preying on them all, this Dracula story manages to surprise, delight, and, yes, scare us in equal measure. But while Holt is a dab hand at the weedy gent part, Depp mines new depths for her part, and support in the form of Willem Dafoe and Ralph Ineson provides the perfect counterbalances of balmy and stoic. Not everyone's cloaks fit so snugly. While far from an outright disappointment, Aaron Taylor Johnson is nonetheless ill at ease in his role as Friedrich Harding, friend of the Hutters and vampire skeptic whose family is slain for his troubles. He definitely has his moments, especially in scenes that call upon him to show both grand and nuanced displays of emotion, but as a partial focal point for the body of the film, designed to be the audience's way into the strange material, he doesn't quite deliver. Next up, Angelina Jolie as Sway, Gone in 60 Seconds. Gone in 60 Seconds is not exactly awards fodder cinema, but its driven plot, high-octane driving sequences, and many flavoured casts keep it fresh enough for long enough to go down as a dependable action film. And it has a far greater interest in cars than the bulk of the Fast and Furious movies. Nicolas Cage here is Memphis Reigns, a retired car thief who was dragged back into the world by the failings of his little brother Kip. Memphis has to boost 50 cars in 72 hours or Kip gets the chop, and to do so, he assembles his old ragtag crew of criminals, including his old mentor Otto, hardman mortician Sphinx, and his old bartender mechanic flame, Sway. And Sway certainly looks the part with bleach blonde twists of backcombed hair and a Tony Hawk's Pro Skater fashion sense, but never does she feel like a fully realised character. Her lines are short, her presence incidental, and her total effect on the narrative is zero. Now, this isn't entirely Jolie's fault, but she seems unable to mesh into even those limited confines. The fact of the matter is that she persistently looks like a rich kid playing dress-up, not the street-hardened mechanic that she's supposed to be. Even Vinnie Jones, who is mute until the final minutes of the film, manages more personality and verisimilitude in this one. Next up, Lena Headey as Mama, Dredd. Pete Travis took Alex Garland's script and gave us a Judge Dredd that we could depend on in 2012, pushing the memory of Sylvester Stallone's stale take on the character out of our minds and going full 2000 AD. Carl Urban this time around plays the titular judge, a warden of the dystopian Mega City 1, whose job it is to serve as judge, jury, and executioner for the scum on his streets. Called in to bring order to a 200-story high-rise, Dredd has to battle his way through level after level of dealers, heavies, and nasties before he can get his hands on the current drug lord, Mama, who lives atop the tower and keeps the neighborhood under her control with drugs, money, and violence. The job's a good one, and there's not a comics fan out there who will say Dredd doesn't feel authentic and exciting, or indeed that Urban wasn't the perfect man for the job. But Lena Headey's performance leaves something to be desired. Now we know Headey has the chops to play a truly sinister villain, and the character design and makeup are spot on, but somehow these things don't quite come together in her performance. Yes, she can be somewhat forgiven for chewing the scenery as this is a comic book adaptation, but at the same time her character feels a little wishy-washy, thus never either settling fully into the Joker-like mania nor the more nuanced character that her background suggests. Up next, Robin Williams as Walter Finch, Insomnia. Insomnia is maybe the most overlooked title in Christopher Nolan's filmography. It takes LAPD detectives Will Dahmer and Hap Eckhart to Alaska, where their efforts to assist local police on a murder case are complicated by the fact that Eckhart is about to testify against Dahmer to internal investigations. And then Dahmer shoots and kills Eckhart accidentally while pursuing the murderer. And that the murderer, Walter Finch, just can't help but involve himself, playing cat and mouse with Dahmer as he tries to find a way out. Al Pacino is reliable as an LA detective because he's literally been playing the role for his whole career, but Robin Williams somehow misses the mark, despite putting in an uncannily dark turn in 1 Hour Photo the same year. He's not bad here, but he's not great. Definitely not 1 Hour Photo great, and that's kind of the problem. Perhaps he felt he couldn't deliver the same performance twice and then tried to do something different with Insomnia. The film really is as good as a US remake of a foreign language film can hope to be, but it lacks the more seething, sinister overtones from its villain, never totally selling him as the vicious mastermind that he's supposed to be. Next up, Don Cheadle as Bashar, Ocean's 11. Steven Soderbergh and screenwriter Ted Griffin gave us the heist film of the 21st century just 1 year in. Ocean's 11 has all the star power of the Rat Pack original, but makes the action and dialogue pacier, the sets and suits more stylish, and the team so expansive that it's got just about anyone who was anyone in it at the time. George Clooney is Danny Ocean, a hustler and thief who is just out of the joint and looking to put a crew together to knock over Vegas's Bellagio, Mirage, and MGM Grand all in one night for $160 million. On board for the job is his old pal Rusty Ryan, wealthy financier Ruben Tishkoff, pickpocket Linus Caldwell, and a whole host of other bit players, including demolitions expert Bashar. Beginning to end, the direction and cinematography are slick and seamless, and the cast play their parts to perfection, each bringing something unique to the ensemble, whether that's charm, wit, neuroses, humor, or a terrible, god-awful Mockney accent. That's because, perplexingly, Don Cheadle's character is a working-class Londoner, except he's not really. Nothing about his bluster, affectations, or accent suggests authenticity. And in a film where everything is so smooth as a jazz quartet, each tosser and bloody hell sticks out like a bashed thumb. Next up, Christopher Walken as the Emperor, Dune Part 2. Denis Villeneuve wowed global audiences with his take on Dune in 2021, introducing us to the Atreides family, the desert planet Arrakis, giant sandworms, and spitting at royals. The director then doubled down with Dune Part 2, which made his universe even larger, as Paul Atreides rises through the ranks as a warrior, mystic, and leader in order to avenge his fallen household against the beastly Harkonnens and the literal Emperor of the universe. With a large cast and multitude of nuanced parts, every cast member put their shoulder to the grindstone and gave it their all, delivering a film that is precisely the space spectacle author Frank Herbert always intended. No shade to David Lynch, of course. But that doesn't mean there wasn't at least one miscasting along the bunch. Christopher Walken plays Emperor Shaddam IV, and while he's not chewing the scenery or even doing a bad job inherently with the material, he just doesn't fit compared to everyone else. The problem is that he just can't not be and act and talk like Christopher Walken. Fortunately, the Emperor has precious little screen time, leaving the villainy to be meted out by the Harkonnens, with Austin Butler, Stellan Skarsgård, and Dave Bautista in range-testing nigh unrecognizable roles. And Christopher Walken being Christopher Walken is kind of his trademark, but it sticks out more than usual when everyone else around him is doing their best to really become someone and something else. Next up, Edward Norton as Will Graham, Red Dragon. While not the best of the Hannibal Lecter films, these Silence of the Lambs will forever be the benchmark, Red Dragon is nonetheless a worthy entry in the series, bringing back Anthony Hopkins as the fine old cannibal, whom FBI agent Will Graham reluctantly enlists to help track down serial killer the Tooth Fairy. Much like The Silence of the Lambs, the film finds its FBI agent balanced and teetering between two killers and struggling to come out on top. Red Dragon is actually a remake, though, of Michael Mann's Manhunter, which had a serviceable Brian Cox as Lecter, and William Peterson getting it right the first time as Will Graham. Norton was just too young for the part of the seasoned agent here, but also perplexingly played the character far more naive and youthful than he needed to be. And it's a shame because we know that he could do grown up at the time, given the performance that he turned in for American History X 4 years earlier. This leaves us without a strong tether to the film overall, though, following a wishy-washy lead that's dwarfed by the supporting cast. Next up, Gwyneth Paltrow as Emily Bradford Taylor, A Perfect Murder. Andrew Davis's remake of Hitchcock's Dial M for Murder doesn't get mentioned very often these days, having largely been left in the 90s. But it is a good movie with a surprising stack of talent in front of the camera, including Viggo Mortensen, Michael Douglas, and Gwyneth Paltrow. The trio play Emily, the pampered younger wife of Wall Street trader Stephen Taylor, and then David Shaw, the ex-con posing as an artist that Emily's been having an affair with. Upon discovering the affair, Stephen hires David to murder Emily for $500,000 and make it look like a botched robbery, but needless to say, all does not go to plan. Screenwriter Patrick Smith-Kelly reimagines Hitchcock's film as a steamy and stylish late 90s crime thriller, rewriting the plot to fit, and for the most part, it works, not holding a candle to the original of course, but standing out as its own thing. Now, Mortensen and Michael Douglas could do this with their eyes closed, and in theory, Gwyneth Paltrow should have been able to also. Having done great work around this time in Seven, Hard Eight, and Sliding Doors, yet she falls flat in the Grace Kelly role. Yes, this one is designed to be played with less theatrics and more realism than the Hitchcock movie, but Paltrow just goes a little too far, flattening her character out into something bland and uncharismatic. Next up, Mike Myers as General Ed Fennick, Inglourious Basterds. Quentin Tarantino knows how to put a film together, combining high and low culture to make auteur pictures that play like tentpole actioners. And Inglourious Basterds is just that, a new version of war film The Inglourious Basterds that ditches most of the plot and characters to make room for wisecracking dialogue and brutal violence. With an ensemble cast that unites US and German stars, including Brad Pitt as US Lieutenant Aldo Raine, Michael Fassbender as British Lieutenant Archie Highcox, and Christoph Waltz as the villainous Hans Landa. In an alternate history of the Second World War, Aldo heads the Bastards, leading a mission into occupied France to snuff out the Reich leadership once and for all, while Landa is hot on their heels. It's bloody, it's chaotic, and it probably takes a top 3 spot in Tarantino's filmography. But there is one scene that doesn't play like the others, wedged into the second act during Archie's introduction. The man recruiting him to assist the Bastards abroad is General Ed Fennick, played by Mike Myers. And he's doing what Mike Myers does. He's got a fake mustache, facial prosthetics, and a preposterous British accent. And overall, it's kind of hard to take anything that he says seriously. It feels, for 5 minutes, that we're dropped out of Bastards and we're watching Austin Powers do undercover work. Tarantino is of course known for casting against type, but this does nothing for the character scene of the film and is a strange moment in an otherwise perfect piece. And finally, we have Keanu Reeves as Jonathan Harker, Bram Stoker's Dracula. We may have just been graced with the best Dracula adaptation we've seen this century, thank you Mr. Eggers, but that doesn't mean we should ignore last century's offerings either, especially not Francis Ford Coppola's version, with Gary Oldman in the title role and Anthony Hopkins as Van Helsing. Bram Stoker's Dracula follows English solicitor Jonathan Harker, played by Keanu Reeves, to Transylvania, where he parleys with the Count and unintentionally gets the old fella hooked on his fiancée Mina. The film nails the lavish gothic aesthetic and eerie undertones and stands apart as one of the century's best retellings of the Dracula myth, retaining just a touch of the Hammer vibe but with much more writing talent and budget at its disposal. But we all know the weak link, and it pains us to say that it's Keanu Reeves. The Point Break actor is not known for his dramatic range necessarily, and his take on Jonathan just doesn't work. The accent is terrible, he never seems at home in his own skin, and there's not a moment that Keanu doesn't look to be recalling lines from a script. Yet we're able to get past it and focus on the talent around him. After all, Jonathan is rarely alone, as he's the primary plot device connecting and causing the different parts of the story, so we almost exclusively watch him opposite grand, masterful, and, in Oldman's case, eccentric performances that all but paint Keanu into the scenery.